Ahoy, bonjour, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Evelia Manak, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Clean Tech team within the Trade Commissioner Service at Global Affairs Canada. Before we begin, I acknowledge that I'm speaking from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, who have welcomed many nations to this land since time immemorial. Welcome everyone for this session of the Go Global Market on Europe and Africa. This series is specifically designed to help Canadian clean tech companies like yourselves identify high potential export markets around the world and provide you with the tools to make this a reality. For those who may not be familiar with the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service, we are a subset of Global Affairs Canada within the Government of Canada. We work with Canadian exporters to provide them with practical advice on foreign markets and on-the-ground intelligence, and support them with their international growth with our numerous programs and services. With a presence in more than 160 cities worldwide, we, the Trade Commissioner Service, can help you do business around the world. And the good news is that colleagues from other parts of the clean tech ecosystem have joined me today to explain how they can also help you with your growth. So I am pleased to be joined today by a series of colleagues who will be presenting on the following themes. First, we will hear on opportunities and trends in Europe and Africa. This will be followed by my colleague, Vertishka Grover, the Clean Tech Trade Commissioner covering Asia on opportunities and trends in her region. This will be followed by her colleague, Claudia Gutierrez, the Clean Tech Regional Trade Commissioner covering Latin America and the Caribbean, also presenting opportunities and trends in her region. This will be followed by a presentation on how to leverage free trade agreements to grow your business. Then we will provide you with a series of short presentations on numerous programs and services to help you in your export journey, namely TCS, Export Development Canada, Business Development Bank of Canada, and the National Research Council. With this, I welcome my colleague, Peter Bauer, Regional Clean Tech Trade Commissioner for Europe, based in Berlin. Over to you to begin today's presentation. Thank you, Peter.
Yes, thank you very much, Evelia, and good morning, everyone. And I'm delighted to be part of this panel with so many colleagues, and I look forward to this session. So let's get straight into it. So why Europe? And just to mention that I will be using Europe and the European Union interchangeably today. Of course, there are some important clean tech markets that are not in the EU, such as the UK, Norway, and Switzerland. But I sometimes we'll be speaking about Europe and sometimes about the EU, simply because the approach is really very similar, whether it's in the EU or in these other markets. And sometimes it's just easier to speak about what's happening specifically in the EU, because that's a particular set of policies. You see there that an outline of my presentation today. We'll be going through those slides shortly. But before we start, just to answer the question at sort of a very high level, why Europe? First of all, looking at the macro figures, simply the market size, just in the EU, 450 million people with high purchasing power in general, but very importantly also robust IP protection and science-based regulations, and of course preferential access through CETA. And you'll be hearing more about that later from some of the colleagues. Very important at the moment, of course, is the fact that Europe offers a stable and a predictable policy framework. I don't need to explain why that makes it a haven for clean tech companies at the moment. And we see very strong demand for clean tech and for ESG-related solutions. Europe is sometimes described as a place where things move slowly. It's cumbersome, many member states that need to agree in the EU. But once they do reach agreement, we find that it is a very solid framework with a whole set of policies, with incentives and financing possibilities, and it does not change very easily. And so that commitment to reaching net zero by 2050 is very much in place in the EU. And because of that, it remains a place where there's very strong demand for clean tech and for ESG related solutions as before. And sometimes, because of this clear commitment, sometimes rather quietly, the EU continues to achieve some of its goals and some of its interim goals. Just last week, the European Commission, after looking at the national energy and climate plans of the member states, said that the EU is pretty much on course for reaching their greenhouse gas emission reduction target by 2030. So they're on track at the moment to achieve a 54% reduction in compared with 1990 figures, which is really impressive. The target is 55%. That is mostly driven by very strong growth in renewables, currently contributing 24% to the EU's electricity mix, due to go up to 42% by 2030. So just to mention that briefly. I'll get to the slides contents in a minute, but just before that, a few more sort of preliminary remarks. So we've seen this, we see the strong demand in the EU, but what is interesting to note, and we will get to that in the rest of the presentation, is that there's strong demand, in particular in areas where Canada has very strong capabilities. And for that reason, we've seen Canada's clean tech exports to the EU growing very strongly. You may know that Canada is the second largest export market for clean tech after the US, but what many people don't know is that it's also the most dynamic market for Canadian clean tech exports. And these exports have more than doubled over the last 10 plus years. So this is not a recent story. Europe has been interesting for quite some time, but it's even more relevant right now. We will, before we look at some subsectors and that EU trade balance, let me just mention, this is a high-level overview. And I will be talking about hundreds of billions and how much money is going into various sectors. But I realize that for you, mainly SMEs, looking at Europe, of course, you don't need $50 billion to be happy, or 2 billion, or maybe not even 100 million. Maybe 1 or 2 million would be more than enough for you, or a few 100,000. And that's why it's always important to go from these this very macro picture to as much detail as possible. And that's why we as trade commissioners love to talk with you about your specific business model, your technology, product, service, and how that can be, the opportunities for that in Europe. And here, the TCS, Evita already mentioned this, we working closely with our partners, EDC, BDC, NRC, other government departments, provinces. We're your secret weapon. We have a network of colleagues across Europe, clean tech colleagues. We collaborate closely also in support of clients. So we love to engage with you and to see how we can help you. So if you're interested in finding out more, please contact our colleagues in Canada at the regional offices, or if you're interested in Europe, feel free to contact me directly as well. So moving to this first slide here, this is just sort of to give you an overview to really position Europe in the globe. You don't need to look at all the details, but essentially this shows the EU's clean tech trade balance in the years up to 2024. All the graphs above the horizontal line are where Europe exports more than they import, and the ones at the bottom is where they are a net importer. So you will see that the EU, for example, is a big importer of batteries, solar panels, and related systems, but a net and heat pumps, for example, but a net exporter, for example, of wind turbines and related technologies, of electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. So that is areas where the EU is particularly strong. But of course, this is not a static picture. And we see a lot of, for example, Chinese competitors, even in these core areas of European competence, such as EVs and wind turbines, moving into the European market and sometimes also investing here. So that is just as a general overview of the EU's clean tech trade balance. I think this is a great overview because this is, and you can look at the slide yourself, but these are what have been identified by the EU as net zero strategic technologies. And these are not just nice drawings, but this is in terms of the EU's Net Zero Industry Act. these technologies have been identified as the ones, strategic technologies, where the EU also has set specific targets that they want to meet 40% of domestic demand with domestic capabilities by 2030 and want to achieve a global market share of 15% by 2030. Now you will see there that in many of these areas, Canada has strong capabilities, strong technology and experience, and could contribute to reaching these goals, perhaps working with European partners or by investing in the EU or simply exporting technologies. Now, just a note there, and I won't read all of that. You can see that it includes offshore wind, onshore wind, offshore renewables, hydrogen, and related technologies, carbon capture, all these areas where Canada is really strong. So that's why that underlines the point that I made earlier, that there's a strong match between what the EU needs and what Canada can deliver. Here, just a brief mention of nuclear, because sometimes people ask, why isn't nuclear mentioned there? Nuclear is part of the green transition in Europe. It's just being treated slightly differently because there's a bit of a compromise, because some EU states, as you may know, do not, like Germany, for example, no longer has nuclear power. Some others oppose it, but it has now been accepted as part of the green taxonomy in the EU and can, with certain preconditions, also receive green financing in terms of the green transition. Just a quick note about that. So moving on now to some specific subsectors where we see great demand matched by Canadian strengths. The first one is water and wastewater. What you see there is a map of water stress in Europe, and the darker the red, the higher the levels of water stress. This is something which is often neglected or not as much in the headlines, but around 30% of Europe's population face water stress each year. And of course, it's very relevant in the context of the green transition, because people very soon realize that we need water for everything, not just for agriculture and internal shipping, but especially for so much of the green and the digital transition that is on its way. We need it for chip factories, we need it for hydrogen, etc. So data centers, of course. So that is an area where we continue to see strong demand, and Canadian companies being very strong players in Europe. This is renewables and electrification. I already mentioned how renewables are expanding, continue to expand. Solar actually overtook coal as a source of electricity in the EU this year, and some sort of a symbolic change. And you see there that installed wind capacity is expected to double by 2030. Installed solar capacity will increase threefold. Heat pumps will increase 1.5 times. And the last one is perhaps the most interesting, that electric vehicles are expected to increase tenfold to reach 30 million by 2030. Here as well, we see strong inroads by Canadian manufacturers, but just to say that this is sort of some of the key elements, and of course it's all related, the growth in renewables, electrification, which of course is transmission and distribution. Again, you don't need to look at all the details and the sources that I quote there, but of course, because of the growth in electrification and the growth in renewables at the same time, Europe does need significant investment in transmission and distribution. And that is simply a graph showing the span of various forecasts for how much investment is needed, will be needed, and it ranges between 70 and 100 billion euro per year. So that is up to 2050. So clearly, there are a lot of opportunities here for smart grid tech, system integration, and digital solutions. Again, areas where Canadian companies are very active in Europe and are doing well. Hydrogen has been discussed a lot in Canada, in Europe, and I know that there is also the debate about how feasible it is. Sometimes the cost is an important factor. But this slide is really just to show that Europe is really a global leader as far as major hydrogen projects are concerned. So nearly half of major hydrogen projects worldwide are located in Europe. We see strong collaboration. It's an area where we have, for example, also the Canada-Germany Hydrogen Alliance in place. So there's a lot happening here. Unfortunately, there are also challenges that remain. There's no, we need to be honest about that. So the market will still need a long time to develop, to achieve maturity. Only a small percentage of the projects in Europe, only a small percentage of them have reached final investment decisions. But having said that, the demand is real, the plans are in place, and we see the projects continuing here in Europe. The pipelines being built also here in Germany, where I am based. So, of course, we need to look at the risk, and there are challenges on the way, but hydrogen will be an important part of Europe's energy future, and also an important element in the relationship between Canada and Europe. So the picture is very similar with carbon capture and storage. You see there sort of an overview of the main projects in Europe. Again, we don't need to go into detail here, but you see that carbon capture and storage is more than just a theory. There's a lot more pragmatism in Europe these days, and particularly since the further invasion of Ukraine and the shock that was, there's a lot more pragmatism about reaching the goals that the EU has set for 2050, and carbon capture and storage is definitely part of that solution. And again, we know that this is an area where Canada has strong capabilities and where we see the Canadian companies active in Europe. Just two final notes before I get to those events. Just two other elements to highlight. I've covered some of the subsectors, etc., sort of the classical ones, but I just wanted to mention two areas where we see very interesting developments, where the topics of discussion in Europe, and the one in particular, or both really, where Canada is well positioned and has or should have a lot of potential. The one obviously is critical minerals. Europeans call them raw materials, but there is a great demand for these. Some of them are classified as strategic materials. And in many cases, there's a lot of dependency, especially on China, who have a lot of refining capabilities. But so if you are involved in any way in the supply of rare earths or critical minerals, including lithium, copper, nickel, platinum group materials, then there's a lot of demand, a lot of interest in Europe, not only because they need these critical minerals, but because they need them from reliable partners, like-minded, safe countries that can be trusted. The other topic to mention before I wrap up is AI in clean tech. It's AI plays a huge role everywhere, right? But in clean tech, there's a lot of promise for developing new technologies and business models, for making processes more efficient, grid optimization, all of that. And again, it's an area where Canada is acknowledged as a global leader. Some people tell me that the business models are sometimes simply built on the reputation of the Canadian founders because they are internationally known in this area. So this is an area where we should be doing more. But just to wrap up, the TCS, as I said, we're keen to help you. We're not just about theory and market potential analysis, but also there on the ground at trade shows where we'd be keen to support you. So just to say that looking ahead with rising risk and uncertainty in other markets, Europe is a great place to be. We would love to work with you to help you enter the market or to expand your business here. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter. Next in line is my colleague, Anita Kundi, Regional Cleantech Trade Commissioner based in Nairobi, covering Africa. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you for that. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak to you today about the cleantech opportunities in Africa. For my presentation, I'm going to be focusing on two subsectors that we see the most success for Canadian companies. And these subsectors are energy and water and wastewater. And I think a lot of Canadian companies, when it comes to doing business in Africa, the risk perception is quite high. So I would like to start this presentation by providing 2 key facts about Africa. By 2050, 1 in 4 people will be African. The continent will have more than $16 trillion in combined business and consumer spending. From a business perspective, it's simply not a region to be ignored. Now is the time to pursue opportunities in this continent. We tell Canadian companies to take advantage of lower competition compared to other regions. The second point is half of the world's fastest growing countries are in Africa. Countries like Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Rwanda, who are seeing 8% and above in GDP growth in the past 10 years, they offer significant opportunities for Canadian companies. Africa is very diverse. The continent in itself is a $3 trillion economy with over 1.3 billion people spread across 54 countries. Traveling within the continent is difficult, so please do make use of the Trade Commissioner Service where we can help you. The continent itself is a home to a growing middle class and the world's youngest population, who will soon be part of the largest global workforce. While the risk perception of doing business in Africa is quite high, there's a number of initiatives such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which are working to resolve some of these issues and resolve trade challenges. Once fully implemented, this agreement will make Africa one of the largest trade areas given the number of countries involved, and it will also enable multinational companies to benefit from the large consumer base. In February of this year, Canada launched its first global Africa strategy, and through this strategy, Canada aims to strengthen economic cooperation and investment and build on the strong foundation of development background that Canada has had in Africa over the last 60 years to invest in technology and invest in infrastructure. In the last 5 years, the value of two-way mechanized trade between Canada and Africa has increased by more than 2/3 to 16.3 billion. With one of the planet's most diverse ecosystems, Africa's abundant resources include 30% of the Earth's critical minerals, 60% of its solar energy potential, and 25% of global diversity. As such, the continent is key to the world's green energy transition. So on this slide right now, I'm going to mention 3 factors that are driving opportunities in the energy sector. The first one is around 600 million Africans still lack access to reliable electricity. So this is people who are not connected to a grid, they're living in off-grid areas, and there's a lot of initiatives by governments, by multilateral development finance institutions to make sure that these people are connected to the grid. So we're seeing quite a number of initiatives in this place. In countries in Northern Africa and in countries like Ghana, Gabon, and South Africa, they've already reached some of the targets, but challenges remain in places like Central Africa and the Sahel regions, which still have very low levels of access to electricity, and we're seeing a lot of investments being made to connect these people and to come up with generation projects. Now, the second point is, even when people are connected to the grid, half of people in Africa enjoy a supply of electricity that works most or all of the time. My personal anxiety in this presentation today is that the power might go out at any minute because it's just not reliable power. So issues like grid congestion, variable generation, and inadequate maintenance have jeopardized the dependability of the grid and result in a lot of blackouts. So we're seeing quite a lot of opportunities in this challenge for companies that can work with utilities to modernize the grids. The third point is the existing transmission infrastructure in Africa is inadequate, and the power systems in most countries incur substantial losses. Insufficient transmission capacity is limiting African countries to tap into the renewable energy. So lots of opportunities here for Canadian companies with the requisite technology to support utilities to deal with this challenge. In Nigeria, for example, the installed capacity of gensets in the largest city in Lagos is triple the installed capacity of the overall national grid. That shows you that not only is power unreliable, but it shows you that people have the capacity to pay. Businesses that are currently using diesel gensets have the capacity to pay. They're using dirty and very expensive fuel, and these businesses and these households could be displaced from diesel if they could get solutions that are solar and battery energy storage oriented. Over the past decade, we've seen a lot of growth in solar projects in Africa. The installed capacity of solar has moved from 1.2 gigawatts in 2015 to more than 24 gigawatts in 2023. There's been growth in both utility scale projects and also in decentralized generation, like mini grids and off-grid systems. So Africa has seen more than 80% surge in renewable energy investments in the past 5 years. There's significant investor confidence in the continent's long-term potential in this area. We've seen major projects in countries like Egypt, in Morocco, in South Africa, and in Ghana. And we're seeing a lot of mini grids and off-grid systems in smaller markets as well. The region is not solely focused on one technology, but countries are embracing the least cost technology. So there's been talks of nuclear, for example, right now. There are talks of natural gas as well. Countries are more concerned about getting the power to people as opposed to like which technology makes the most sense. But there has been adoption of large-scale solar, of off-grid solar, of wind farms, and battery energy solutions. There's also been growth in C&I projects as companies seek reliability or they seek ways to reduce their carbon emissions. In 2024 alone, nearly 6 gigawatts of captive C&I projects and 1.7 gigawatts of wheeling projects were announced in Africa. Fuel reduction projects, in particular for remote mines, are quite on the rise. In West Africa and in places like Nigeria, where, as I said earlier, businesses running on diesel, they're looking for solutions for C&I and are looking for renewable energy and battery energy solutions. Reports show that the African C&I sector has a bright future ahead, and the rise of AI in Africa and the required data centers is also going to drive up demand for decentralized energy. Now, on the climate finance side, climate finance flows in Africa have grown significantly with more than 44 billion US invested in 2023. These climate finance flows come mostly from multilateral development finance institutions and also some equity providers who are providing both grant and concessional lending to companies and to governments as well. For example, recently the World Bank and the African Development Bank and partners launched an initiative called Mission 300 to connect 300 million people to electricity in Africa by 2030, mostly in Central Africa and the Sahel regions. So Mission 300 is going to be focusing on expanding the electricity grid and deploying mini grids and standalone solar solutions to bring power to remote and off-grid communities. So in this slide and in the next slide, I have summarized the key opportunities that we've seen Canadian companies' success in Africa. These include opportunities like designing, installing, and integrating renewable generation systems, energy storage and implementation of distributed power generation, smart grid technology, predictive analytics, feasibility and engineering for transmission, infrastructure, and also for generation projects as well. Subcontracting to EPC companies working in the region. There's quite a large number of European-based, Asian-based EPCs, even North American-based EPCs that are working in the continent, Turkish EPCs that have expressed interest to provide subcontracting opportunities to Canadian companies. So this is an area that we see opportunities for you. Commercial and industrial power solutions. And then also for education institutions, we're seeing quite a high rise of demand for technical training for utilities, EPCs, and curricular development with select education institutions to enable the growing workforce to understand and adapt to the new technologies required in the energy sector. Canada has a long history of mining in Africa, and this presents opportunities to engage on greening the sector. The mining industry is one of the most important energy consumers in the region, and its energy demand is set to increase significantly in the upcoming years. Africa holds 30% of the world's critical minerals essential for energy transition and AI hardware. So we're seeing quite a lot of opportunities and a lot of movements in this file. So for these mines, some of them are grid connected, some of them are off the grid. They all have the same concerns, access to reliable and cost-effective and green power. So this is an area that we see opportunities for Canadian companies. There's also a lot of scrutiny on environmental impacts of mining operations, which highlights significant opportunities for remediation and wastewater management technologies. So in these next two slides, I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the trends that we're seeing in water and wastewater in Africa and some of the findings that trade commissioners are seeing on the ground. The Africa water and wastewater sector is undergoing a lot of transformation right now because there's a lot of challenges related to aging infrastructure, non-compliance with environmental standards, and funding. There's also limited strategy for water prioritization and demand planning or water reuse by utilities. Despite the presence of quite a number of regulatory frameworks, only a small percentage of wastewater meets these standards, and industrial compliance is still low. Non-revenue water currently stands to around 40 to 50%, which is quite high. And this is due to the issues with the infrastructure, the issues with metering, and this is leading to a lot of water loss and inefficiency. Some African countries are going to be water stressed by 2050. So there's a lot of demand right now and a lot of thinking around how to preserve water, how to reuse water, and how to treat wastewater. Many countries struggle with shortage of modern wastewater treatment facilities, aging infrastructure, and insufficient technical expertise. So this has led to large volumes of untreated and poorly treated wastewater, which is being discharged directly into natural water bodies. So despite these challenges that we're seeing in the water sector, there's a lot of growth and there's a lot of potential for Canadian companies to tap into this sector, particularly when Canadian companies can introduce new technologies focused on sustainability and water efficiency. With industries in particular, last year, we did a study and we spoke to a number of industries, manufacturing, mining companies, and we're beginning to see, these industries are beginning to see long-term benefits of water reuse, and they're actively seeking solutions to improve compliance with environmental regulations as well. So there's a clear opportunity for Canadian clean tech providers to play a significant role here, and some of the opportunities that we're seeing include decentralized wastewater systems with renewable energy application or at least greater energy efficiency, advanced monitoring technologies such as SCADA, IoT, and AI-driven solutions for leak detection to improve water quality management and reduce non-revenue water, water reuse and recycling technologies like reverse osmosis, ultrafiltration, brine and sludge management technologies, infrastructure projects to increase or upgrade existing ponds and lagoons, as well as consultancy on water resource management, modeling, and development plans. To succeed, however, the feedback we received is industries and utilities want to see Canadian companies that can provide cost-effective and scalable solutions that can address these unique challenges that are faced by African industries and African water utilities, particularly decentralized treatment technologies and also digital water management systems. And also the feedback we've received here is that they want to see the demonstration on what the return on investment will look like and some of the operational benefits of using these technologies. So pilot projects in this area in partnership with local stakeholders is essential to drive adoption and to also enter the market. So in Africa, your best business strategy is knowing the right person. Relationships and local partners are very important in doing business in the continent. Trade commissioners can support you with identifying qualified local partners, distributors, and service providers. In the energy sector, we've seen success when companies work on subcontracting opportunities on IFI-funded projects because they have a very clear procurement as opposed to public sector opportunities, which can be quite lengthy in the procurement circle. And then I would like to close here and thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Anita. Next in line, I would like to welcome my colleague, Fabien Licotta, Trade Commissioner for the Strategic Trade Engagement Team. À toi, Fabien.
Donc, ma présentation aujourd'hui se focusera essentiellement sur l'AECG, qui est l'accord de libre-échange le plus ambitieux conclu à ce jour par le Canada. Il ouvre les portes aux 27 États membres de l'Union européenne. C'est un accord qui couvre autant les biens, les services, les investissements et les marchés publics. C'est l'accord le plus complet qu'on a sur ce continent, mais ça ne veut pas dire qu'il faut oublier les autres accords qu'on a. Donc, je nomme rapidement. On a un accord avec les non-membres de l'Union européenne, tels que l'Islande, le Liechtenstein, la Suisse et la Norvège, qui est un accord de libre-échange qui se concentre essentiellement sur le commerce des biens. Nous avons aussi un accord modernisé avec l'Ukraine, un accord moins complet que celui de la SCG, mais qui inclut tout de même des dispositions sur les services et le commerce digital. Et nous avons aussi un accord avec le Royaume-Uni qui, dans le moment, est un accord de continuité. Donc, la décision qui a été prise suite au Brexit, c'est de faire une copie de l'AECG. Donc, les dispositions que je vais vous mentionner aujourd'hui s'appliquent au Royaume-Uni aussi essentiellement. Donc, comme dans tous les accords, les fondements des accords de libre-échange du Canada reposent sur 4 grands principes. Le premier étant la non-discrimination. Donc, ça garantit que les exportateurs canadiens ne sont pas traités moins favorablement que les entreprises locales. Donc, si vous faites des affaires, par exemple, en Allemagne, vous serez traité de la même façon qu'une entreprise allemande. Le deuxième principe, c'est la transparence. Ça garantit que les règles et la réglementation sont publiées et accessibles. Donc, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire concrètement ici? C'est que si vous faites affaire, par exemple, en Italie, les dispositions qui s'appliquent à l'AECG avec l'Italie doivent être publiées au minimum en anglais. Donc, ça serait de manquer de transparence si la réglementation était juste en italien. Le troisième fondement, c'est les règles prévisibles. Donc, ça permet aux entreprises de planifier et d'atténuer plus facilement les risques à faire des affaires sur un marché. Et le dernier fondement, l'accès préférentiel qui donne aux biens et aux services canadiens un avantage concurrentiel. Donc, c'est là qu'on parle de réduction tarifaire à la douane ou bien encore une simplification des procédures d'octroi de licence, par exemple. Si vous êtes une entreprise qui a un produit tangible, vous avez nécessairement un code qu'on appelle système harmonisé, SH, qui va permettre aux douaniers de l'Union européenne d'établir la tarification pour le produit d'énergie renouvelable que vous essayez d'exporter. Donc, dans votre cas, par exemple, si on veut exporter des panneaux solaires, bien, ces panneaux solaires-là ont un code spécifique et ce code détermine la classification tarifaire à la douane. Ça permet aussi d'établir les règles d'origine qui sont applicables pour avoir droit à cette réduction-là avec ce code. Même une légère différence dans les codes peut avoir une incidence sur votre admissibilité au tarif. Donc, faites très attention à trouver la bonne information. Et une des façons qu'on voit à la prochaine diapositive, c'est notamment en visitant notre site web au bas de la page, le tarifffinder.ca. Même si l'adresse est en anglais ici, vous avez toute l'information en français de disponible. Une fois que vous avez la bonne classification, ben, sur le Tariff Finder, vous pouvez aussi trouver l'information à savoir s'il y a une réduction tarifaire. Et dans la plupart des cas, oui. On parle d'environ 98% des biens qui traversent la frontière européenne à partir du Canada qui ont droit à une réduction tarifaire ou complète même. Bien entendu, cet avantage tarifaire ne s'applique pas automatiquement. C'est pourquoi on a établi dans l'accord de l'AECG et autres accords des règles d'origine. Une règle d'origine, en quelques mots, c'est de s'assurer que le produit est suffisamment canadien pour pouvoir traverser la frontière européenne et bénéficier de l'avantage tarifaire. C'est toujours l'importateur qui va demander le traitement préférentiel à son agence douanière et pour cela, il doit avoir toute la documentation en main lorsque vous avez exporté vos biens vers l'Europe. Pour s'assurer que vous avez notamment la bonne information au niveau du code SH et la bonne règle d'origine, il y a un mécanisme qui s'appelle la décision anticipée qui vous permet de contacter l'agence douanière du pays importateur et de faire valider si l'information que vous avez en votre possession est exacte. Et une fois qu'ils vont avoir rendu leur décision, ben, vous êtes assuré du traitement que vous recevrez à la douane européenne. Rapidement, vous avez les règles d'origine qui s'appliquent dans l'Union européenne. Donc, la première étant que le produit est entièrement obtenu au Canada. Donc, par exemple, qui a été exclusivement produit ou transformé au Canada à partir de composantes canadiennes ou qui a poussé au Canada, comme une pomme, par exemple. La deuxième, c'est qu'il y a eu un changement tarifaire. Donc, le produit est suffisamment transformé au Canada. Donc, on a importé des matières premières d'un pays tiers, par exemple, des composantes pour construire un panneau solaire. Et une fois que ces composantes-là ont été assemblées, bien, on a un nouveau produit qui a un nouveau code SH. Donc, il y a un changement tarifaire. Donc, la règle d'origine s'applique. Et finalement, la dernière règle, c'est que il y a une part importante de la valeur du produit qui provient d'intra-canadiens, que ce soit un pourcentage ou en valeur monétaire. Donc, je vous ai parlé du Tariff Finder, mais vous avez aussi Rosa, qui est un produit qui a été mis en place par l'Union européenne, qui vous permet d'aller chercher la bonne règle d'origine avec votre code SH et qui vous pose une multitude de questions qui vous permet de finalement faire une auto-évaluation de votre règle d'origine et qui vous donne une plus grande certitude quant au traitement de votre produit à la douane. On parle maintenant des services. Donc, tout ce qui est pas tangible n'a pas de tarif à la douane. Donc, c'est plus simple à ce niveau-là. Vous n'avez pas de code SH associé. On peut parler de services de consultation, d'ingénierie, de recherche et développement. Ça garantit l'accès au marché et un traitement national égal aux fournisseurs canadiens. Vous n'avez pas d'obligation ni de présence locale à avoir sur le marché européen. Donc, pas de filiale pour offrir votre service, par exemple, sur ce territoire-là. Et il y a aussi des processus réglementaires qui doivent être publiés. Les décisions en matière d'octroi de licence doivent être rendues en temps opportun et de manière équitable. Ça vous permet aussi, en tant qu'entreprise canadienne, de soumissionner, de fournir et de développer vos services sur plusieurs marchés de l'Union européenne. Ici, on parle du commerce numérique, un peu le même principe. C'est un produit non tangible, donc pas de tarif applicable à la douane. On parle par exemple de logiciels, des services de diagnostic à distance, des services d'analyse de données ou des plateformes d'info nuagiques. Et ça peut faciliter notamment cette disposition-là, la circulation de vos données. Bien que ça ne soit pas aussi ambitieux que les accords plus récents qu'on a, bien, la SCG soutient la libre circulation des données avec des protections de la vie privée. Ça crée un environnement numérique sûr et ouvert. À la prochaine diapositive, lié au commerce électronique et au commerce des services, ben, c'est l'entrée temporaire pour les gens d'affaires. Mais l'avantage que la SCG donne, c'est qu'il facilite l'entrée des gens d'affaires canadiens sur le territoire de l'Union européenne. Ça nous permet, par exemple, d'envoyer des ingénieurs, des consultants, des techniciens ou des cadres. Et ça permet, par exemple, d'enlever les quotas ou les tests de besoins économiques pour faciliter cette entrée-là. Mais ça ne réduit pas votre obligation d'aller chercher un visa ou un permis de travail pour entrer sur le territoire de l'Union européenne. Mais ça réduit significativement les obstacles bureaucratiques, ça c'est certain. On parle de l'accès au marché public. La SCG ouvre les marchés publics de l'Union européenne aux entreprises canadiennes. Ça change la donne, en particulier pour les technologies propres. Ça pourrait inclure des secteurs comme les infrastructures durables, le traitement des déchets de l'eau, les systèmes d'énergie renouvelable, les technologies de mobilité intelligente et d'efficacité énergétique, et j'en passe. Pour être admissible, votre offre doit être un service ou un bien couvert. L'entité gouvernementale doit être couverte par l'accord et vous devez respecter le seuil de valeur qui est publié pour cet appel d'offres. Et tous ces appels d'offres-là sont publiés sur le Tenders Electronic Daily, TED, qui est central à l'Union européenne, et vous avez accès à toutes les informations nécessaires pour pouvoir déposer une offre en tant qu'entreprise canadienne. Le dernier chapitre que je voulais couvrir, c'est le chapitre sur l'investissement. Donc, la SCG offre une protection solide aux entreprises canadiennes des technologies propres qui investissent dans l'Union européenne, que vous ouvriez une filiale ou que vous engagiez dans une co-entreprise, ou même si vous acquérez une entreprise locale, on vous garantit une non-discrimination, une absence d'exigence de performance également. Donc, par exemple, vous n'auriez pas à vous approvisionner localement de façon obligatoire. Le droit de transférer librement vos fonds, les capitaux et les profits que vous allez faire sur le territoire de l'Union européenne. Des protections contre l'expropriation si jamais ce genre d'événement se présentait. Et petit bémol, l'AECG va prévoir un système permanent et institutionnalisé, de règlement des différends en matière d'investissement. Mais ça, c'est pas avant que tous les pays de l'Union européenne ont ratifié l'accord, ce qui n'est pas le cas. Donc ça, c'est un petit bémol qui n'est pas applicable à partir de maintenant, pas à partir, mais encore à ce jour. Mais tous les chapitres, les éléments que je vous ai parlé précédemment, c'est déjà applicable dans les 27 membres de l'Union européenne. Finalement, en résumé, à la dernière diapositive, je vous laisse sur le pacte vert pour l'Europe qui vise la neutralité climatique d'ici 2050. Donc, ça comprend des investissements massifs dans les énergies propres, l'industrie durable et l'adaptation au changement climatique. Je ne veux pas trop insister là-dessus parce que mon collègue précédemment en a déjà parlé, mais c'est juste pour vous dire que les opportunités pour les entreprises canadiennes existent et on vous encourage fortement à utiliser l'AECG comme mécanisme pour faciliter votre entrée sur ce territoire-là, que ce soit au travers de l'exportation de biens, de services, un investissement ou encore votre participation à un appel d'offres publié par une instance gouvernementale de l'Union européenne. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Excellent. Et merci beaucoup, Fabien. And with this, I will hand it over to my colleague, Ritishka. Over to you to begin today's presentation.
Thank you, Evelia, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today. Appreciate the warm introduction. I'm very happy to highlight some of the most promising clean tech market opportunities for Canadian companies. As you all may know, market diversification has become so important and relevant as our companies seek to build a supply chain resilience and navigate uncertainty in new markets. So without further ado, on the next slide, I will start to share a little background and overview about the Asia-Pacific region. The Asia-Pacific is a large, diverse, and dynamic region with more than 4.7 billion people living in countries ranging from the world's largest energy consumers to small island economies and remote communities that are among the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. This region accounts for more than half of global energy consumption, with a majority of that regional consumption sourced from fossil fuels still. The Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific region is home to 3 of the world's largest economy, like India, China, and Japan. And by 2040, it is projected that the region will account for more than half of the global economy. You'll see a little bit of information about Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy, which was launched in 2022. And since then, there has been a shift in how Canada engages with the region. The pillars of the strategy reflect the growing strategic and economic importance of the Indo-Pacific and outlines a comprehensive approach to deepen partnerships across the region. The strategy is built on 5 interconnected strategic objectives or pillars, and it commits $2.3 billion over 5 years to increase Canada's presence, partnerships, and influence across the Indo-Pacific. One of the key pillars of the strategy focuses on building a sustainable and green future, and another one on expanding trade, investment, and supply chain resilience. Through these pillars, Team Canada aims to support clean technology, collaboration, environmental protection, and climate action. And this includes facilitating partnerships between Canadian clean tech companies and Indo-Pacific markets to drive sustainable growth. Through this strategy, Canada is really positioning itself as a reliable and culturally aligned partner that can offer innovative solutions in areas of clean energy, climate resilience, and sustainable infrastructure. The region's dynamic economic landscape and urbanization are really driving demand across many sectors, from education to health, agriculture, energy, financial services, you name it. So there are lots of opportunities with a growing focus on water, food, and energy security. So there is a huge demand across critical minerals, energy decarbonization, CCS, further development of regional power grids, water and wastewater treatment, and technologies promoting circularity or waste to value. I will cover these subsectors in the next few minutes to provide you an overview of the market landscape and the types of opportunities that exist. The energy transition to a low-carbon economy is a top priority for most countries. While Asia remains home to the majority of the global coal power and it has the biggest gas expansion plans, it is also the only region on track with the goal of tripling renewable energy capacity by 2030. This rapid growth in variable renewables is accompanied by exploring and adopting energy storage solutions, including utility-scale solutions for long-duration energy storage, for example, and technology supporting grid optimization and modernization. When it comes to the energy mix, most countries are still heavily reliant on coal, as I mentioned, with some transitioning to importing and using more LNG, but there are selected markets that have increased their renewables installed capacity over the past few years, mostly dominated by solar and wind. Increasing integration of energy storage with renewables across both rooftop and utility scale systems in the region continues to gain momentum, driven by increasing renewable energy adoption and supportive policies. Markets like Australia, that remains the leader in energy storage, particularly for utility scale projects and solar storage projects. Also, China, with its massive solar and wind energy installations, is expanding energy storage capacity, focusing on utility scale projects, and aim to have 30 gigawatts of energy storage by 2025 to help maintain grid stability. Other countries like Japan also have long-term goals to reach 15 gigawatts of storage by 2030. And other markets in Southeast Asia, for example, Vietnam, has positioned itself as a leader in renewables development. Its solar capacity skyrocketed to more than 16 gigawatts of installed capacity, largely because of its favorable government policies, including the well-structured feed-in tariffs that were launched and introduced in 2017, which attracted significant foreign and domestic investments in solar projects. As a result, Vietnam has become one of Southeast Asia's fastest growing solar markets, making it a prime example of how government policy can accelerate renewable energy adoption in the region. In line with the growing installed capacity, Vietnam presents significant opportunities for battery energy storage development and also interest in adopting pumped hydro solutions. I wanted to mention also Taiwan, which is the largest offshore wind market in Asia-Pacific, and it has the projections to reach 8 gigawatt of installed capacity by 2027. Other markets around the region are also seeing similar opportunities with increased renewables installed capacity. Other than that, improving energy efficiency and boosting sustainable infrastructure is a priority for many markets across different applications, including the industrial sector, transportation, manufacturing, and the built environment. The demand for new infrastructure in Asia-Pacific is huge. The ADB, or the Asian Development Bank, estimates that the region requires more than $1.7 trillion per year until 2030 to meet its infrastructure needs. Most ASEAN member states have set national energy efficiency targets with a regional target of energy reduction of 30% by this year, by 2025. Since buildings account for about 40% of total final energy consumption in Southeast Asia, they hold some of the highest potential for cost-effective energy savings here. The use of building energy codes is one example of an energy efficient strategy. And other opportunities include implementation of a variety of products across street lighting, more efficient pumps and equipment in the agriculture sector, for example. Such energy savings also extends to the transportation sector, with EVs, electric vehicles, playing a big role. China, of course, has the highest EV adoption rate, and even India is building up its own supply chains. Singapore has planned to completely phase out vehicles with internal combustion engines by 2040 and increase construction of EV charging stations to 28,000 by 2030. And it has already tested both electric cars and buses on its transportation network so far. Thailand, on the other hand, is seeking to position itself more as an EV manufacturing hub, with plans to offer tax deductions and privileges to EV manufacturers in the pipeline. And Indonesia, similarly, has launched Southeast Asia's first electric vehicle battery plant located in the province of West Java. The necessary infrastructure still remains a challenge, with full electrification and charging stations that will need to be in place before EVs can really take off in the region. Outside of that, exploration of alternate fuels like biofuels or e-fuels like green methanol, ammonia, or green hydrogen-derived fuels continue to be an area of interest. A few countries in Asia have already published hydrogen strategies or roadmaps, including Japan, South Korea, Singapore, China, India, and more recently, Indonesia and Malaysia. Japan is probably the most advanced in its planning, having become the first country in the world to adopt a national hydrogen framework back in 2017. And they already successfully worked on a trial project to co-fire ammonia with coal. and there are also plans by other operators to test hydrogen in partnership with natural gas in commercial power plants. Singapore also released its national hydrogen strategy, and it plans to expand its biofuel economy, develop an ammonia supply chain, and implement ammonia bunkering standards. They're also developing standards for hydrogen and methanol bunkering. Though the interest in hydrogen continues, there is uncertainty, and it's slowing down the momentum around hydrogen as the industry goes through a little bit of a structural change and increased uncertainty involving lack of political commitment, high costs, and also uncertainty related to long-term offtake agreements in hydrogen projects, and feasibility concern on large-scale hydrogen exports. However, new power plants are still planned to be hydrogen-ready for blending, and markets like Japan, as I mentioned, are investing heavily into ammonia co-firing plants. When it comes to other technology areas like carbon capture and storage, or CCS, in Southeast Asia, at least 7 potential projects have been identified and are in early development. Singapore has identified an important role for CCUS in its long-term emissions reduction strategy, and it's actively pursuing research and international partnerships, including with Australia. They also launched 2 grant calls a couple of months ago for pilot projects in Singapore's Jurong Island. Estimates of CO2 storage capacity in the region are still uncertain, and most of this capacity is expected to be in deep saline formations, and depleted oil and gas reservoirs will also provide large-scale storage opportunities. Regulations to facilitate investment in CCUS, in particular CO2 storage, have yet to be developed in the region, although countries like Indonesia have made significant progress. In some countries, existing oil and gas regulations could serve as a starting point. In 2021, the Asia CCUS network was formally established by Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry and the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, long names, but with a mission to facilitate the deployment of CCUS in the region. Australia and Japan have operational CCUS projects, and most governments are only now recognizing that policy support is essential to drive investment. There continues to be opportunities for pilot or demonstration scale projects in the region, and even markets like Taiwan is exploring various CO2 storage sites development. The offshore region of Taiwan's west coast has unique geological formations that hold great potential for carbon storage. While offshore potential is still being evaluated, companies are moving forward on inland carbon storage demo sites. Direct air capture technologies are less developed in Southeast Asia, but they represent a potential future avenue for large-scale carbon removal. Key issues that remain to be addressed in the regulations include site selection, permitting requirements, long-term ownership, and liability for stored CO2. There is also a huge focus on building and developing regional power grids, especially for Southeast Asia. The growth in cross-border regional power trade is helping to encourage the development of renewable energy projects. Recent initiatives include the expansion of an ASEAN power grid, and there have been new announcements of conditional approval of the Sun Cable project, where Singapore is looking to import 1.75 gigawatts of low-carbon electricity from Australia into Singapore via a subsea cable, which is going to be quite an undertaking. In addition, under a renewables pilot project, Singapore is working on an LTMS, or Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore power grid, and is supporting up to 100 megawatts of hydropower from Laos via the 2 other countries. In line with the growing importance of grid stability and modernization, managing intermittency associated with renewables integration, there's also a focus on making grids smarter and adopting advanced metering infrastructure. Asia-Pacific is the world's biggest metering market with around 1.6 billion electricity and gas customers, and the installed base of smart electricity meters in Asia-Pacific is forecasted to grow steadily over coming years. There's also opportunities in substation automation, digitalization of power transformers, where we will see more investment. And countries like Japan, South Korea, and Singapore are actively integrating advanced energy management systems and smart grids to optimize energy use and improve resilience. Apart from energy decarbonization and efforts to modernize power grids, waste management and water security continue to present a growing array of challenges and opportunities in the region. And when it comes to technologies managing waste and promoting circularity, rapid economic growth and development are changing the Asian landscape and generating a tremendous amount of waste, including specific waste streams like construction waste, electronic waste, but also, of course, municipal and residential waste. There are lots of challenges associated with managing waste in this region. The implementation of structured collection and sorting at source needs a lot of improvement, and recycling rates are still pretty low and at the hands of the informal sector. So Canadian companies need to work to think how they can include and incorporate these communities into their business models. The waste composition in Asia is also very different from the waste composition in North America, where it has a higher moisture content, it's more mixed, it's lower in calorific value, and so that poses different challenges for the technology infrastructure. The tipping fee or the fee for waste collection is also relatively low, and it changes the economics of projects significantly. For countries with limited land space like Singapore or other island nations with remote communities, there is a growing focus on decentralized waste and water treatment to reduce the dependence on huge infrastructure investments. And water security and wastewater treatment continues to be of growing importance in the region, with opportunities across municipal and industrial wastewater treatment, technologies supporting desalination, and instrumentation and monitoring of water quality and other parameters. Non-revenue water amounting to 30% on average across the region, with some markets higher than that, of course. And it's because of a combination of factors, including obsolete or aging infrastructure, poor operation and maintenance, illegal connections and theft and inaccurate metering, and also other inefficiencies in billing systems, for example. Aging pipelines and infrastructure are a huge challenge for water utilities, and they're really looking into solutions with predictive analytics for leak detection or fault location and ways to extend the remaining lifetime of their assets. This makes it very difficult for utilities to keep water tariffs affordable as well. So there's no cookie-cutter approach for the transition to a low-carbon economy here in Asia-Pacific, and each market's adoption will be influenced by local policies, access to resources, and geographical constraints. However, some markets may still face regulatory and infrastructure barriers, as well as bottlenecks that can impede clean power development. So we've talked a lot about the great opportunities here in the region, and while there is no doubt to that, it remains untapped to a large extent as well. It is also important to discuss some of the market barriers and challenges that Canadian companies may face as you look to pursue commercial opportunities in the region. One of the key challenges Canadian firms face while collaborating with Indo-Pacific companies on clean energy goals is navigating the diverse regulatory environments and varying levels of market maturity across the region. By 2030, renewable energy is expected to account for 30 to 50% of the power generation mix in most Asia-Pacific markets, but project developers in this space continue to face challenges with land acquisition, whereby permitting and licensing is quite complex, and resolving these processes can take a lot of time and delay project timelines, and they also add risk and uncertainty, requiring firms to have strong local knowledge and patience. This holds for any projects that require building of new infrastructure. Even in countries where this is not a requirement, there is a strong preference for foreign companies to build trusted local partnerships through which they can engage the project owners in such cases. Canadian companies are also encouraged to incorporate a broad selection of financing options, proactively diversify supply chains, including manufacturing capabilities. Understanding and adapting to different business cultures, where relationship building decision-making styles are very important and very different. Building trust and long-term relationships is quite important here, as local partners prioritize proven track records and culturally aligned engagement. The first question that Canadian companies often get asked by local contacts is, do you have a case study of this technology in tropical environment conditions? And so it's useful for companies to have done some kind of product verification in environments different from Canada or in tropical environments. Asia is also a price-sensitive market, as you may know, and that also requires companies to pivot and redefine pricing strategies. To address some of these challenges, Canadian companies can deepen its on-the-ground presence through the trade commissioners and local partners, and also offer tailored market intelligence and capacity building support, or can seek from these partners. Having access to flexible financing solutions and co-development models with large corporates can also help bridge the gap a little bit and create shared value. By leveraging Canada's reputation for quality, sustainability, and innovation while being sensitive to local contexts, Canadian firms can better position themselves as a trusted partner for players in the Indo-Pacific's transition to a low-carbon economy. So that's pretty much all what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you again for taking the time. And though we've spent a lot of time on the market landscape, trends, and upcoming programs in the Indo-Pacific, I honestly feel that we've barely scratched the surface. So I fully encourage you all to reach out and ask questions. And with that, I will pass it back to my colleague, Ivelia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francisca. Now, my colleague, Claudia Gutierrez, a regional Clean Tech Trade Commissioner based in Bogota. Over to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Evelia, and thank you everybody for being here today. It's a great audience. I really appreciate the time you're taking to connect with us and learn about the different regions. So again, I'm Claudia Gutierrez, Regional Trade Commissioner for Clean Tech, covering Latin America and the Caribbean. And let's start by knowing what is Latin America and the Caribbean. So the countries between Mexico and Chile, and covering all the islands in the Caribbean, that represents 8.25% of world's population. It's a region that is still a young population, most of them between 5 and 40 years, and equally gender distributed. It's important to note that around 81% of the population lives in urban areas, in comparison to 56% globally. So that creates certain stress in terms of the consumption, energy consumption and water consumption, which are the two sectors that I will cover today. The region is expected to grow 2% in 2025, and it's important also to know that it's highly vulnerable to extreme weather conditions, especially phenomena like El Niño and La Niña that can create extreme droughts or extreme floods. The main opportunities, as I already mentioned, I will focus today in energy transition and water and wastewater treatment. However, there are opportunities in other areas of the clean tech sector, like waste management, for example, which is not very well developed yet. And basically, in the waste sector, what the companies or the operators are looking for are cost-effective business models that they can easily implement in the region. The main challenges are the political uncertainty in key economies such as Peru, Argentina, even Colombia. And the other challenge is that projects are limited in size. Especially in the Caribbean, you'll find that the islands are quite small. However, there are opportunities. It's just a matter to find the right niche for you. Most of these projects in the Caribbean depend on the international financial institutions, the IFI's fundings. So that's another area that you must learn and understand, and you can find support from our climate finance colleagues. Let's talk about the GDP growth in the region. So this is split by sub-regions. So the one that will experience the better performance, if we can say it, it's South America. So starting from Colombia to the south. And from the Caribbean, we have excluded Guyana because Guyana is experiencing or has shown growth of 20%, 25%, which is like out of the average for the region. This region will maintain these low levels of growth, basically because it's been affected by the negative global development and the complex regional economic outlook. It's important here to mention that the public investment is low in comparison to other parts of the world, and the governments play a key role in attracting private investment to boost the economy. And they attract private investment by creating the legal framework that allows that, for example, the public-private partnerships, and permitting or allowing private participation in certain areas. For example, 2 years ago, Brazil opened the door for private investment in the water sector, and they started to launch projects and auctions to attract private capitals, and it was a great success. The other fact that will affect the GDP growth in Latin America will be the dependency on the Chinese investment, especially in the infrastructure sector. And of course, that will create some volatility and financial pressures if we see a slowdown in the Chinese economy. So let's talk about the opportunities. Energy, let's start by the energy. Of course, opportunities in energy transition. We already see that trend too in Asia. All the world is moving to the diversification of the matrix and implementing different projects and using different sources for the energy generation. In Latin America, we have a clean matrix, if we can say it, because most of its power comes from hydroelectricity. However, the hydroelectricity is quite vulnerable to climate change. So that's the main driver for governments to switch and to start and foster the implementation of projects with new energy sources, mainly solar and wind. So you'll see in the chart that hydro is the first one. Then we have thermal, of course, but we're trying to reduce the participation of thermal, which has been used especially as a backup power. And we're trying to replace that by solar and wind because of the resources. We have the resources in the regions, so that's why we're using those two sources. This new energy requires implementation of new infrastructure. It requires new energy storage capacity, requires smart grid solutions, distributed energy solution, and also the change in the legal frameworks and the regulations that provide more flexibility to implement new business models that, as you know, comes with the energy transition. So some countries are already working towards that change in the regulation. Others are behind that, but just to say that in general, the country is moving to diversifying its matrix, and it's moving to adapting the legal frameworks and the regulations to the new schemes and the integration of these new projects. So as you can see in the chart, this chart is from BNA Americas, and they are they expect that the more than 600 projects will come into pre-construction or construction phases by the end of 2025. And as you see in the chart, most of them will come from solar and wind, leading by Brazil, Chile, Argentina, Peru, Mexico, and Colombia. If you want to see like in detail the projects that are being developed in each one of the countries, if you're interested in one or two countries, let me know. I can help you to go into those details and provide additional information. So main opportunities, of course, exist in the non-conventional energy sources projects, not only in developing those projects, but in the energy storage, in smart grid, and all the ancillary services around those. The main challenges, of course, the adaptation of the regulatory frameworks, slow permitting and licensing process. My colleague Ritishka already mentioned that is happening in Asia too. So we have seen, like in Colombia, for example, there was a huge auction process to award solar and wind projects, but then those projects left behind because of the timing of having the permitting and the licenses process, the communities buying. So it's important for you to keep in mind that this could happen and the projects could be delayed. It will happen eventually, but you can expect some delays. Now let's move to the water sector. Water is another important area where there are a lot of needs. So this region, it's the most water-rich region in the world, with more than 30% of the world's water resources. However, there is a mismatch between the water sources and the areas of the water demand. There is poor water quality. There is not an adequate water management. There is not an adequate treatment for the water. There is an aging infrastructure that is causing up to 60% of losses that represent $8 billion per year in water losses. And we are seeing an increased pollution in the aquifers, in rivers, lakes, and they are affected by new pathogens that we haven't seen before. So it's a problem, but that creates opportunities for companies that are already treating those pollutants that have solutions for water management, for monitoring. So I'll talk about that specific opportunities later. So market drivers, I've already mentioned some of them. So the lack of fresh water resources is another one. So in certain areas of the countries, there is not enough fresh water. In some territories, there is no fresh water, like in Barbados, for example. They depend on the rainfalls, and then they depend on desalination plants. the urbanization and the industrialization expansion, that's also increasing the demand for water. There are certain measures or the stringent water treatment regulations that are also creating some opportunities. So, for example, the measures like zero liquid discharges for industries, it's creating the need for them to use water recovery or water reuse systems or solutions for their industrial applications. And here we can see the opportunities. I just divided them into municipal and industrial segment. For the municipal, the upgrade of the aging infrastructure is critical. The private participation in the projects, so I already mentioned Brazil opened the doors for that. El Salvador opened the doors for the private participation too. Colombia, Peru, they already have private entities participating as water operators. The process control and automation of the operations, that's the main objective, is to provide efficient operations. And here the energy efficiency plays a key role because the energy consumption of the water sector is high. So it's important to provide solutions for that, like could be artificial intelligence solutions or automation, a lot of automation. For the industrial segment, as I mentioned before, the wastewater reuse for industrial processes, water control, desalination plants, not only because they need water in areas where there is no freshwater resources, but also because there are projects for production of green hydrogen. So green hydrogen requires water, and we need desalination plants to be able to produce hydrogen and be a hub for export hydrogen. And advanced water treatment, again, the new pollutants, the new pathogens that are coming into the water require advanced solutions. Key players. I didn't mention that in the energy sector, but we have the presence of multinational companies well installed in the region. And for the water segment, we easily find companies like Suez, DuPont, Silent, Veolia. They can be your competitors or your partners. You can provide your niche solutions to those companies, and they can implement that. Some of them operate the water services, so they can include your solutions into their portfolios. Usually in urban areas, there is just one water provider, whereas in the rural areas, there are multiple of them. That depends also on the countries. So, for example, in Colombia, there are more municipal water companies than municipalities. It's important also to understand that depending on the country, you will have to deal with a public-owned company or with private operating companies. It's easier to go with the private ones. And it's important to always work with integrators and service providers that already serve those operators, those companies, because you can integrate your solution to the integrator or service provider portfolio, and they offer them to the water utility. In terms of project, here there is a list of the projects that are in early works and pre-constructions that have changed in the last year. These include water projects in agriculture and industrial water, and potable water and wastewater. So it's quite large to cover, and you'll see that most of the projects are being developed in Chile and Peru, and that's because most of them are being developed in the mining industry. So Chile and Peru are strong in mining, and that's why you see that trend. In terms of the stage of the projects, you'll see that most of them are in the design and engineering phase, and some of them are already in pre-construction, which is good. If you want to learn more about those projects, we can talk about the specific subsector, the specific country, and see the stage, for example. It's good that we can identify the ones that are in the early stage, because you can have an early entry into them and increase your chances of being selected as provider. So as Ritishka mentioned, there are certain aspects that you need to keep in mind when doing business in the region, in the Caribbean, in Latin America. It's important to keep in mind that building relationships first, and then the business will come. That means that you need to choose a right partner that understands not only the language. In many of the cases in Latam will be Spanish and Portuguese. If you go to the Caribbean, they are English speakers. However, it's important to understand the local culture too. So identify the right local partner is key for succeed in this region. You need to have a long-term strategy and dedicate resources, and not only financial resources, but human resources. People that can come, remember, build a relationship first, the business come after. So it's important that they see who is the person behind the business, who are they dealing with. So usually buyers here create that the strong relationship first, and then they start presenting opportunities and introducing you to new people, to the key players, to the key buyers in the sector. So when we can say, I already mentioned that you can find like thousands of hundreds of operators. However, the sector itself, in the case of water, for example, it's small, so you'll see the same people. So it's important to really connect with the people that can refer to another companies, to another opportunities. Be persistent, especially if you're dealing with the government, because government projects can take a while for the permitting processes, because of the budget allocation that can take a while. So if you have the chance, start first with private projects, because in addition, because they are faster, and in addition to that, you can if you already have an implementation or a project in place with the private sector, you can use that as a reference for government projects like public tenders or things like that. So try to start with the private entities and then go to the governments. It's a price sensitive market. That means that you need to adapt your solution to that. And the best advice is to have solutions that are modular solutions or buildable solutions. So you can offer not the full package, but you can start with a module, and then you can build on that and provide additional services. And in that way, it will be perceived in a different way in terms of the cost or the investments that people need to do in front. Each country will have specific cultural, legal aspects, like the technologies, for example, are subject to local regulations. So if you already have your solutions with international certificates, that's good. However, you maybe need to obtain the local certification. So if you have an international certification, it will be easier to get the local one, but still you need to dedicate time to do that process. And the best way to know those specificities and particularities is to contact the local trade commissioner in the country that you are dealing with. But I think that's it from me for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Next, we welcome my colleague, Fabien Licata, who will walk us through how free trade agreements can support your market expansion. Ton tour, Fabien.
Nous allons survoler les accords de libre-échange dans la région de l'Asie-Pacifique, ainsi que nos accords en Amérique latine. Mon objectif aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment de vous donner les renseignements pratiques, les outils qui vont vous aider à réduire vos coûts, à élargir vos accès au marché et puis à prendre des décisions éclairées en matière d'exportation. Comme on l'a si bien vu dans les présentations précédentes, les technologies propres constituent l'un des secteurs d'exportation les plus prometteurs du Canada, puis les accords de libre-échange sont là pour contribuer à stimuler la croissance. Malgré le fait que les accords de libre-échange ne sont pas négociés par secteur et sont plutôt négociés par chapitre, vous allez voir c'est quoi les chapitres là, dans quelques minutes. Je suis certain qu'il y a beaucoup d'éléments dans cette présentation-là où vous aurez un aperçu de qu'est-ce qui peut s'appliquer à votre entreprise, que vous soyez une entreprise qui exporte des biens ou une entreprise qui offre des services dans les technologies propres. Donc, sur cette diapositive-là, on a le PTPGP, donc le partenariat transpacifique progressif dans la région. C'est composé de 12 pays, dont le Japon, le Vietnam, le Mexique, et tout récemment, le Royaume-Uni qui, après avoir négocié son entrée, les parlements de chacun des pays membres, incluant celui du Royaume-Uni, ont ratifié l'accord. Donc, ils sont allés au parlement de chaque pays et ont dit « On veut que le Royaume-Uni accède à l'accord. est-ce que vous donnez votre autorisation? Oui, non, il y a eu un vote. Et comme tout le monde a voté oui, ben, l'accord, le PTPGP, est maintenant en force au Royaume-Uni également. C'est un des accords commerciaux les plus importants et les plus modernes au monde. Ça nous relie à 11 pays dans la région de l'Asie-Pacifique. Là, je fais un petit bémol parce que le Royaume-Uni n'est pas dans l'Asie-Pacifique, mais on le compte quand même dans les 11 pays. Donc, bien que ça a l'air de ça, ce n'est pas une obligation d'être situé dans cette région-là pour faire partie de l'accord. Ça comprend des marchés en forte croissance comme la Malaisie et le Vietnam. J'entrerai pas en détail tout ce qui est des opportunités en termes de PIB ou de croissance parce que ma collègue a couvert le sujet de long en large. Puis pour les exportateurs de technologies propres, cela signifie un accès à plus de 500 millions de consommateurs à des conditions préférentielles. Ça donne des avantages stratégiques tels que la simplification de la réglementation. On a vu que dans certains pays, ça peut être compliqué. Donc, nous, en ayant un accord, on a cet avantage-là par rapport à nos compétiteurs. Protection de la propriété intellectuelle et mobilité des professionnels. Vous avez ici les membres ainsi que les candidats potentiels à droite. Donc, ces pays-là sont en attente d'approbation pour accéder au PTPGP, en fait, d'entamer des négociations. Et vous comprendrez que pour certains pays dont je n'aimerais pas le nom, ça risque d'être un petit peu plus difficile parce qu'il y a beaucoup de questions d'enjeux politiques, droits humains qui vont freiner une entrée imminente. Vous avez les accords de libre-échange qu'on a avec les pays de l'Amérique latine. C'est pour la plupart tous des accords bilatéraux, sauf quelques exceptions. On a le Mexique qui fait partie du PTPGP, mais fait aussi partie de l'ACE1, donc l'accord avec les États-Unis et le Canada. On a le Pérou, le Chili qui font partie aussi du PTPGP, mais on a aussi des accords bilatéraux avec ces pays-là. Ce qui est intéressant, c'est que ça donne la liberté à l'entreprise de choisir selon quel accord elle va faciliter son entrée sur ce marché-là. Mais bien entendu, si vous choisissez un accord pour un chapitre en particulier, vous devez vous tenir aux obligations de ce chapitre-là. Vous pouvez pas, par exemple, prendre les tarifs d'un accord comme le PTPGP, mais utiliser les règles d'origine sous un autre accord. Ça fonctionne pas comme ça. Il faut vraiment il faut marier ces deux conditions-là au même accord. Ces accords-là, ça constitue des portes d'entrée essentielles vers un marché où la demande en technologie propre est forte, notamment dans les domaines des énergies renouvelables, comme on l'a mentionné, des infrastructures hydrauliques, des solutions d'adaptation au changement climatique. Puis, chaque accord comporte des dispositions différentes. C'est donc essentiel de savoir lequel s'applique où. J'irai pas en détail parce qu'on n'a pas assez de temps, mais il faut vraiment, même si ma présentation englobe tous ces accords-là, ça ne veut pas dire que les mêmes conditions s'appliquent dans chacun d'eux. Donc, je vous invite à aller explorer. Tous ces accords-là sont disponibles sur notre site web des délégués commerciaux. Donc, on va regarder, survoler rapidement comment est-ce qu'on exporte des biens, comment est-ce qu'on bénéficie d'une réduction de tarifs à la douane. D'abord, il faut faire ce qu'on appelle de déterminer la classification de votre produit. Donc, si vous êtes une entreprise qui exporte des biens, faut que ça soit un bien qui est tangible, donc on peut le toucher, on peut le voir. Contrairement aux services où c'est pas un produit tangible, les tarifs s'appliquent seulement à des produits physiques. Donc, vous déterminez la classification avec ce qu'on appelle le code SH, donc le système harmonisé, qui est composé de 6 chiffres. Ces 6 premiers chiffres-là sont les mêmes partout sur la planète, à quelques exceptions près. Et ensuite, chaque pays a la liberté de rajouter des chiffres pour préciser la nature du produit en question. Donc, je vous donne un exemple. Si vous essayez d'exporter vers le Chili une solution technologique, des panneaux solaires, tiens, vers le Chili, ces panneaux solaires-là vont avoir un code SH particulier. Ça ne veut pas dire que ce même code SH-là s'appliquera en Colombie. La Colombie pourrait très bien avoir un code SH différent. Après les 6 premiers chiffres, bien entendu, comme je l'ai mentionné. Une des façons pour obtenir ce code SH, c'est de consulter notre site web tarifffinder.ca. Il n'y a pas de version française de l'adresse du site web, mais une fois que vous êtes entré sur le site web, vous pouvez changer la configuration en français et vous n'avez qu'à taper vers quel pays vous exportez avec lequel on a un accord de libre-échange et le site web vous donnera la tarification applicable pour votre produit. Si vous connaissez pas votre code SH, il y a la possibilité de faire une recherche par mots-clés Et avec une série de questions, vous êtes en mesure de déterminer avec une forte probabilité quel est le code SH approprié pour votre produit. Une fois que vous allez avoir cette information-là, ça va vous donner le traitement tarifaire. Donc, déterminer le traitement tarifaire préférentiel pour le produit entre ce que le Canada a à payer parce qu'on a un accord de libre-échange et tous les autres pays qui n'ont pas d'accord de libre-échange avec cette nation-là. Bien entendu, l'accès préférentiel n'est pas automatique. Il faut faire ce qu'on appelle confirmer que votre produit rencontre la règle d'origine. La règle d'origine, en gros, c'est qu'on veut s'assurer que le produit est suffisamment canadien pour rentrer dans le pays où on a un accord de libre-échange. Donc, on veut surtout pas qu'un troisième pays nous utilise comme tremplin pour pouvoir exporter dans un pays où on a un accord de libre-échange. Donc, on voudrait pas, par exemple, je vous dis ça vraiment de façon aléatoire, on voudrait pas que le Maroc exporte des produits au Canada sans y avoir inclus un élément canadien ou une transformation suffisante, le réemballer puis l'exporter en Colombie puis bénéficier du tarif. Non, ça marche pas comme ça. Donc là, c'est ça qui fait que on s'est protégé pour s'assurer qu'il n'y a aucun pays qui va nous utiliser comme tremplin pour bénéficier d'une tarification réduite. Et finalement, une fois que vous avez toute la documentation nécessaire, que vous avez démontré que vous respectez la règle d'origine, vous avez droit de demander un traitement préférentiel et c'est seulement que l'importateur, donc votre partenaire importateur, qui peut approcher sa propre douane et demander un traitement préférentiel avec la documentation appropriée qui est disponible dans les accords de libre-échange, bien entendu. Ici, la dernière chose que je veux que vous reteniez, c'est que on a pensé à vous, on a pensé aux entreprises. Il existe ce qu'on appelle mécanisme de décision anticipée. Donc, vous pouvez approcher la douane d'un pays avec lequel on a un accord de libre-échange et leur demander est-ce que la classification que j'ai trouvée pour mon produit et la règle d'origine qui l'accompagne, est-ce qu'elle est exacte? Est-ce que ça répond à votre définition? Et la douane a entre 120 et 150 jours calendrier pour vous donner une réponse. Et avec cette réponse-là, vous êtes certain qu'une fois que vous allez avoir exporté votre produit, il sera traité ainsi parce que c'est une décision qui est liée par l'agence douanière avec laquelle vous avez fait affaire. Alors, la fameuse règle d'origine, de manière simple, il y a 3 principes généraux qu'on voit à travers les accords. Premier principe, le produit, est-ce qu'il est entièrement obtenu au Canada? La plupart des produits qui s'appliquent à ça, c'est les produits de l'agriculture. Ça s'applique peut-être moins, en fait, ça s'applique pas du tout au secteur des technologies propres, mais sachez qu'elle existe. Donc, une pomme, elle a poussé au Canada, elle a été cultivée au Canada, donc elle répond aux règles d'origine. Deuxième règle, changement tarifaire. Est-ce que le produit est suffisamment transformé au Canada? Donc, est-ce qu'on a pris, par exemple, du matériel ou des ressources naturelles d'un autre pays et on en a fait un nouveau produit au Canada? Est-ce qu'on a importé, par exemple, du cuir d'un autre pays ou de la machinerie d'un autre pays, des composantes, pour fabriquer un panneau solaire? Oui, les composantes ont une classification distincte et le nouveau produit ainsi obtenu, les panneaux solaires, vont avoir un nouveau code SH, donc il va avoir eu un changement tarifaire, donc ça répond aux règles d'origine. Et finalement, est-ce qu'une part importante de la valeur du produit elle provient d'intra-canadiens? Ça peut être un pourcentage ou ça peut être une valeur monétaire. Encore une fois, sous chaque classification de produit, vous avez la règle d'origine qui doit être respectée. Oui, donc au niveau des services, chose à retenir, il n'y a pas de tarification parce que c'est un produit qui est pas tangible. Il n'y a pas de douane à traverser vraiment physiquement. C'est plutôt virtuel. Ou une personne comme un ingénieur qui offre son service ne peut pas avoir une tarification liée. Donc, de ce côté-là, vous n'avez pas à vous inquiéter de trouver votre code SH et le tarif qui s'ensuit. On a aussi enlevé la nécessité d'avoir une présence locale, qui peut être une exigence dans plusieurs pays. Donc ça, vous n'avez pas à vous en soucier. Et dans la plupart des cas, tous les secteurs sont ouverts, sauf certaines exceptions qui pourraient être protégées, comme la défense ou encore la santé. Ici, là, l'entrée temporaire des entrepreneurs pour un court séjour, ça fait partie des services. Notamment, on va enlever le besoin de faire un examen, à savoir s'il y a quelqu'un dans ces pays-là qui est capable de faire le travail qu'un Canadien viendrait faire dans le cadre d'un contrat. Donc, on a enlevé cette exigence-là, donc ça facilite l'accès, mais ça vous oblige quand même à faire des demandes de visa ou de respecter les conditions d'entrée d'un pays en fonction de leur loi d'immigration. Au niveau de l'investissement, encore une fois, on s'attend à ce que les investisseurs canadiens soient traités de la même façon qu'un investisseur local dans le pays. qu'en cas d'expropriation potentielle, l'indemnité soit appliquée. Comme je vous avais dit au début, elle est déjà prévue dans l'accord si jamais ça arrivait. Que vous soyez capable de transférer vos capitaux et vos profits avec liberté quasiment totale. Bien entendu, c'est l'idée. Si vous faites du profit, vous voulez ramener l'argent dans votre pays, donc au Canada dans cette situation. Et on a aussi un mécanisme de règlement des différends qui est applicable. Donc, un investisseur qui jugerait que ses droits n'ont pas été respectés par le pays hôte est en mesure d'amener ce pays-là en arbitrage et essayer de plaider sa cause. Donc, au niveau de l'ouverture des marchés publics, ben, ça vous donne accès à des contrats qui sont normalement réservés aux entreprises locales. Ça vous permet de soumissionner aussi sur plusieurs paliers de gouvernement, dépendamment des régions du monde. Ça peut être fédéral, provincial ou municipal. Pour les technologies propres, on peut penser à système d'approvisionnement en eau, infrastructure d'énergie renouvelable ou le contrôle des émissions. Puis vous devez toujours vérifier que votre bien ou service et l'entité contractante sont couverts, que votre contrat dépasse le seuil demandé par cet appel d'offres. Merci.
Excellent. Et merci beaucoup, Fabien. Now, let's explore the programs and services offered by the TCS and other valued partners. We will begin with Lauren Hurst, Cleantech Trade Commissioner based in our Vancouver TCS office, presenting TCS programs and services. Over to you, Lauren, to kick this off. Merci.
Merci, Velia. Thank you very much. Yes, as mentioned, I'm Lauren. I work at our Regional Trade Commissioner office here on the Pacific Coast. And I work closely with Peter and Anita, and we'll build on their presentations today to give you a more general overview of the programs and services that the TCS has to offer. I want to bookend my presentation by saying we strongly encourage you to reach out to your local trade commissioner based here in Canada, as our job in the regional offices here is really to get to know the Canadian companies so that we can pair you well with the opportunities that our colleagues like Peter and Anita bring to light. And so let's dive right in. The Trade Commissioner Service essentially offers export advisory services. So whether you're doing business for the first time abroad or you're looking to grow into new markets, trade commissioners can help you plan your global expansion with key market insights and practical business advice to prepare for international business. We can also assess your potential for success in specific markets. We can help you to understand the effort and resources required to succeed there. We also help you to connect with potential customers and partners across the world, and we can help you to resolve business problems in foreign countries. The TCS's mission is to enable you to expand into new markets, reduce risks, and make timelier and more cost-effective decisions. Plus, we're a free service, so winning all around. We do this in part through our programs. One of our main ones that I want to highlight is our Canadian Technology Accelerator, or CTA program, which is a non-equity accelerator program that offers customized services to high potential and high growth companies in key global tech hubs. Services include advice from industry-leading mentors and introductions to strategic partners, potential clients, and investors. As you can see from the numbers on the screen and from our next slide, past participant feedback has been positive, and it's really attributed their participation in the CTA program to getting a toehold in that market that's allowed them to grow there. Recent clean tech CTAs have taken place in Hong Kong, the UK, Germany, Southeast Asia, and you may have noted that the application deadline for the Pacific Alliance CTA is recently closed, and we have one in the US as well, but today it's about market diversification. We are proud to celebrate Canada's rich diversity of exporters and to provide support for export-ready and export-active businesses owned by women, Indigenous peoples, visible minorities, LGBTQ entrepreneurs, and youth. We have group-specific trade missions and events for these groups, as well as offering tailored funding opportunities. Speaking of funding, our CAN Export program provides a suite of funding options to help businesses grow and access new international opportunities. Our two main ones are that might be relevant to the participants on this call are CAN Export SMEs and CAN Export Innovation. These programs are increasingly popular, so I really do encourage you to speak with your regional office trade commissioner to prepare for the next opening. And Expert SMEs is designed to help small and medium-sized companies prepare for new international markets and to pursue new export opportunities. Can Export Innovation offers funding to help pursue new international R&D partnerships with foreign partners. Unlike its sister program, there's no minimum revenue requirement for Can Export Innovations. My last main slide here is covering the other ways that we traditionally help Canadian companies with potential buyers or partners at industry trade events in Canada and abroad through TCS booths, Canada pavilions, export cafes, and business-to-business meetings. The TCF also organizes trade missions and business delegations at key trade events or business groups, like some of the events that both Peter and Anita mentioned. And when we have a presence at these main shows, that often includes business briefings, networking events, B2B meetings, and site visits. And so it's really a rich opportunity for you to participate in. We really look forward to supporting you with that. So if you're planning on traveling abroad to a show, please also let us know so we can help connect you with those kinds of opportunities. And lastly, just like I said at the beginning, we very much encourage you to reach out to your regional trade commissioner here in Canada. You can do so using the QR code on your screen or the link that is in the chat that Julia will be putting there again. We are based across the country, so please find the trade commissioner that is located closest to your place of business. And we look forward to helping you expand globally. Thank you very much.
Excellent, and thank you very much, Lauren. Up next is Jeff Keats from Export Development Canada. Over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Avilia. Delighted to be here, and thanks for the partnership. As mentioned, I'm with Export Development Canada, or EDC, and we are an export credit agency and a Crown corporation. So as a Crown corporation, much like our friends at BDC, we are government owned, but not government funded, and we operate on commercial terms and principles. Also, as an export credit agency, our focus is on helping Canadian companies go, grow, and succeed internationally. While we work with companies across all sectors, we do have a dedicated focus on clean tech, as you'll see in the next slide. And this dedicated focus started in 2012. We think we are one of the largest, if not the largest, supporter of clean tech in Canada. And last year, I'm proud to say we worked with 500 Canadian clean tech companies. Now, because our focus is on exports and we are commercially sustainable, we do tend to work with companies that are at least 500,000 in revenues and that are technology readiness level 8 or later. And we do this through a variety of solutions to help these companies grow and scale once they're already at this stage. As you'll see in the next slide, some of those solutions include accounts receivable insurance, which is also called credits insurance. This is really a jack of all trades solution for any Canadian company looking to do business internationally. Not only can the insurance mitigate against non-payment risks by your buyers in these markets, but it can be a sales tool enabling you to offer payment terms to new buyers if you do have the insurance, but also a working capital tool because a bank will often lend against an insured receivable versus giving minimal lending value against international receivables that are not insured. There's other ways we work with banks to support Canadian exporters, including a way to provide a guarantee to the bank for any standby letters of credit they issue to a Canadian company. This could be for a variety of reasons, including performance bond, bid bond, advance payment guarantee, supplier bond, and so on. In essence, we replace the collateral requirement the bank would have to issue this support to a Canadian company. On the next slide, you'll see some more solutions we have in partnership with banks and or financial institutions. This includes our foreign exchange guarantee, which we're seeing a lot of uptake on this recently as companies are looking to mitigate against currency fluctuations. Again, much like the last solution, we partner with banks and we remove the collateral requirement they have to provide foreign exchange hedging facilities. And the last bank partnership solution I'll speak to is our risk-sharing loan guarantee, where EDC has the ability to provide a guarantee to share in the risk with a Canadian bank. And the idea here is it helps Canadian banks go beyond their normal credit appetite for international business. We typically share within the risk of 50 to 75% of the loan amount. That being said, there are ways that EDC can act as a lender and provide money directly as well, as we'll see in the next slide. This is typically for later stage companies that are revenues quite often 10 million or more, where instead of working with the bank, we can complement the bank's financing and provide areas of capital like growth capital, capital for mergers and acquisitions, or capital related to international expansion to set up shop in new markets. In addition to this, we can also provide project financing. This does tend to be off-balance sheet project financing, as we'll see in the next slide, typically for deal sizes of 25 million or more of debt, where we are looking at a traditional project finance structure where you've got a sponsor, offtake agreements, project equity, financial advisors, and more. As we move on, we'll see that we also provide investments or equity to Canadian companies. There's three different ways we do this: direct, funds, or co-investments. Direct, we tend to be very selective. We are not as active as our friends at BDC in providing funding directly to clean tech companies, but we can lead or co-lead investments, typically for companies that are Series B or later. But what's much more common for us when providing equity support is to work with funds or through our co-investment program. Finally, in terms of EDC support, we do have non-financial solutions. So we do have knowledge and advisory solutions. We can provide information to companies about going global, entering new markets, navigating trade regulations. Of course, we also make value-added introductions to our partners such as Global Affairs Canada or BDC. And we can make connections when relevant to our international network of large multinational companies that EDC works with. Finally, and I know I'm going fast, but we have limited time. During the tariff situation, we did announce our Trade Impact Program. This is set to facilitate an additional $5 billion of EDC support this year and next to counteract the impacts of tariffs and the geopolitical uncertainty that's happening. To be clear, this is not net new money that EDC is putting in, sorry, not net new products. This is our existing product suite, the solutions I talked about, the insurance solutions, the bank guarantees, and so on. These solutions really are meant to help Canadian companies, clean tech or otherwise, manage risk, enter new geographic markets, access more capital, facilitate expansion, and navigate currency fluctuations. This is not government subsidized. This is not money from the government. This is from EDC's balance sheet. And we've just done an assessment to say that based on current economic factors, we will facilitate $5 billion more than we would during a normal business cycle. Thanks, Evelia. Thanks, team.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Now I will hand it over to our next speaker, William Pollution, Director of International Relations at the Business Development Bank of Canada. Over to you, William.
Thank you, Evelia, and good morning, afternoon to all. So yes, I'm just going to give you a snapshot like our other presenters did in terms of a little bit about a BDC and some of a report on support on market diversification. So a quick next, so just a quick snapshot for those of you that are not familiar with BDC. Like EDC, we're a Crown corporation, so that means we have one shareholder, the Government of Canada, and three effective pillars. Financing as a bank, so we have about 50 billion in our loan portfolio. Our BDC capital, we have about another 5 billion in our capital, and within that we have clean tech funds, about 1 billion specific to clean tech industry today. And the third pillar is our advisory services, and again, we're not out there specifically promoting that to market like KPMG or Deloitte, companies like that, but really it's in support of those companies that we help finance and may need some extra hand holding on anything from HR, financial management, international expansion, etc. And a key part of BDC to understand as well is we're complementary to the Canadian financial services sector. So if you're dealing with Scotiabank, RBC, TD, etc., and you haven't dealt with BDC, our focus is on working with small, medium enterprises, and we will take on risk that often the larger or larger charter banks may not take on, especially depending on your age of company, your size of company. So again, key point here is complementary to the market. So part of your overall financial requirements as you start growing and building your business. And just to highlight that a little bit more detail in terms of like EDC, although we're shareholders as Government of Canada, we very much operate on commercial banking principles. So we are a profitable entity providing a dividend back to the Government of Canada. So a little more detail on the advisory services side of it, and this is where, because the ask on this presentation was really to give you a sense of how we support on market diversification. So this is predominantly done through advisory services, that third pillar. And within that, we have what's called a core international expansion plan. And this is very much to complement what you'll find in terms of maybe your conversations with EDC, the Trade Commissioner Service, or even provincial bodies. But in our case, we often find that entrepreneurs maybe need a little more hand-holding in terms of the actual construction of that export plan or expansion plan. So BDC brings that to the table. So it could be industry and market analysis. It could be a readiness assessment about your company in terms of that diversification. It could be the actual expansion strategy itself. And then tied to that, depending on the market, there's a lot of countries in those continents. So we actually help in terms of narrowing it down a little bit more to help you be precise on where in those respective regions makes the most sense. It could be partner ID and onboarding, something we would do in collaboration with our Team Canada partners. Could be tied to strategy and execution on the marketplaces that you may deal with, or even distribution planning. So again, just when you think about BDC, we're getting into the granular parts of how we help you and your company build. On this part of it, our typical, and this links back to the sort of the current economic reality that we're living in right now because of post January 20th with some of the tariff environment. A typical cycle we see with entrepreneurs that we work with is this is a stable scenario. Short term means 1 year, mid-term means 2 to 3 years, longer term means 3+ years in a normal economic reality. But that's not today's reality. And so what we're finding when we really deal with companies today, and what we recommend for your companies, and probably you're feeling it, time is compressed. So in terms of your decision making, in terms of how do we deal with the current tariff realities, the current challenges of economics, et cetera. So as you're diversifying, that's a key part of the equation. If you're currently dealing with the United States and thinking about these other markets, which is fantastic, but it obviously requires time, effort, resources. So just be prepared for all hands on deck approach, constant communication with your buyers, your sellers, your financiers, et cetera. Your team, your leadership team meeting often, if you're not already that being the case, and really incorporating what we call review metrics on a very regular, weekly basis to make sure as you're growing in this very unusual economic environment that you're ready to diversify and pivot as required. Part of what we bring to the table is two things. One is tied to on the advisory services. So we are bringing in certain new services to help with this reality, and we're focusing on companies in that 2 to 20 million is core. If it's less than that, or your company's less than that, we have other solutions. Or if you're larger than that, other solutions, maybe even tied to EDC. But in this case, it's really making sure that you have exposure to experts, helping you with the trade resilience in terms of your ability to pivot as required, which incorporates a diversification strategy, and then really building resilience into your market expansion in terms of your business in clean tech, whether it's in Canada, across Canada, or into these new markets that you may be considering. And the last part of that is really on the loan side of it. So one of the things that we recognize, similar to what EDC has done and others like FCC on the ag side of it, we've introduced new monies, in this case a $500 million envelope, and it really is to help those companies that have been either directly exporting to the United States, or even if you're not directly exporting, that you need to, having a direct impact on your business because of the tariffs, and you are considering diversification. But again, you need a little bit more relief, let's say, in terms of your financial reality, in terms of cash flows, in terms of your business, and how do you best respond. So what I showed you on the advisory side is one part of it. This side is specific to the loan side of it in terms of maybe providing you with a little bit of liquidity as you start pivoting. And this is just to give you a quick snapshot. Be happy to speak about it more after this. I believe this presentation will be shared with you. But this loan amount is up to $2 million. We obviously are trying to make sure it's provides some fair pricing to market in terms of the current condition. No studies fees, no prepayment identities, no cancellation fees, no proof of expenditure required. So again, providing you with flexibility if you need it, depending on your current reality in dealing with the tariffs today. And again, I won't read this word for word, but again, we'll be sharing this. But the key is that Group 1, whether you're currently an exporter direct in the United States, and again, at least 25% of your business is export, or Group 2, in terms of the nature of your business, is being materially impacted by the tariff structure, is just to let you know that there are some solutions out there. This is one of them that's available to you as an entrepreneur. And just to highlight, there are some exclusions. So this is not for companies that may have been realizing financial difficulties before the tariffs came into play. This is not about refinancing your debt. It's not about restructuring your debt. It's not about rescheduling repayments that currently exist. Again, it's about helping you pivot in this rather unusual economic environment with the United States today. And that's it.
Thank you very much, William. And now I will hand it over to Cheng Yu, Industrial Technology Advisor at NRC IRAP. Over to you, Cheng.
Thank you, Avilia. Bonjour and hello. It is a pleasure to be here. NRC IRAP is Canada's leading innovation assistance program for small and medium-sized enterprises. We provide non-dilutable funding and advisory services to support SMEs' innovation and growth. How do we help you go international? We open doors for you by supporting international collaborative R&D and pilot and demonstration projects. From this map, you can see that we have collaboration with more than 45 countries in the world. And we currently have a $35 million budget for supporting international co-innovation. And we have multilateral platform, bilateral platform, and unilateral funding. We define co-innovation with three types of activities. One is co-development, and one is validation and adaptation. So the co-development is acquisition of the best-in-class technology to fill a gap in Canadian or foreign solutions. So the validation and adaptation part are the activities that you have to prove and validate your technologies or adapted technologies to a certain market condition in terms of standards, regulations, and also local environments. So how do we help you? For the SMEs, we have a journey. We start from assessing your international strategy, and we connect you with the foreign partners, and we help you execute. So in terms of assessment, we have an International Co-Innovation Action Plan program where we provide training as well as funding for business development. The connect part, we work with Global Affairs Canada to organize technology missions, matchmaking events, and also ongoing work to help you develop partners in foreign countries. In terms of execution, we provide funding to support you to conduct collaborative R&D projects or pilot and demonstration projects. Here's a program snapshot for the collaborative R&D programs we run. So we run the Eureka program, which is industrial international network for industrial R&D collaboration that includes more than 45 countries in Europe and beyond. NRC IRAP manages Eureka program on behalf of Canada. So we also have the Canadian International Innovation Program, CIIP program. We manage this program on behalf of Global Affairs Canada. This is a program where we manage bilateral collaboration with multiple countries, including South Korea, Brazil, India, Israel, Taiwan, and Singapore, etc. So we also have bilateral support program for the UK, Germany, and Japan. So what about clean tech? All the programs I mentioned open to clean tech companies to apply. And we have created a new program to address some of the gaps in the funding scheme. This, I'm sure a lot of the clean tech companies are familiar with this chart, this map. You have a very arduous journey to commercialization. There are multiple valleys of death in terms of, on your journey. We have planned significant investment in the product development valley, the number 2, R&D funding across Canada. However, for the valley of death, number 3, the market validation, the deployment side, there's a big gap. So to address this gap, we created a new program called IRAP International Pilot and Demonstration Program. For this new ITPD program, we established it in 2023. We have currently 2 streams. One is Indo-Pacific stream and rest of the world stream. Our project funding for this is about $50,000 to $300,000. And the project duration is about 8 to 12 months. And we want to see immediate or quite close commercialization activities after the successful completion of the projects. So the goal is to help companies to pilot your technology, to prove and validate your technologies in the new market and break the market entry barrier. We currently run 1 call a year. Our hope is to run a biannual calls in the future. This is a unilateral program. IRAP has authority for all the projects. We don't need to compromise with foreign governments on foreign priorities. So it's the best projects move forward. So who do we support and what do we support? In terms of sectors, we support all enabling technologies applicable to all industrial sectors. Key qualifiers include environmental impact, GHG impact, or efficiency improvement. So you can see that we've supported clean energy projects, environmental technologies, carbon management, circular economy, etc. For our program, who are the ideal candidates? We want to see SMEs with growth potential. We want to see firms of at least 10 to 15 FTEs and with about $500,000 revenue, with promising technologies that is technology readiness level of 7 or 8. We want to see some prior experience in domestic piloting activities. In terms of foreign commercial partners, we would like to see you have reputable entities who has potential to influence the market direction. They could be MNEs, multinational firms, large end users, municipalities, utilities, or even industrial alliances. And of course, we want to see that you have very solid go-to-market strategy. You've looked into, the financing plan, the growth plan, as well as how you're going to execute and leverage a successful demonstration. So in terms of impact, the ITPT program is based on our IRAP Fast Pilot in Foreign Markets program, and we've supported about 41 projects with $5.2 million between 2019 and 2022. So we've seen a big success for this program with $93 million revenue reported. So for our most recent call, the first call, we have 108 registrations and 31 projects supported, 11 in the Indo-Pacific region and 20 in the rest of the world. Yeah, that's all I have for today. And we do have alerts for NRC international opportunities. I will send the subscription link to my colleagues at GAC so that if you want to be alerted about these opportunities, you have a way to do that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Cheng, for your presentation and for this information. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all of our speakers for their valuable insights and contributions today. Your expertise has provided us with a rich overview of opportunities, programs, and services. I wish to thank you for joining this conversation, and we all look forward to supporting you in your international growth. Merci beaucoup.